Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Dr. Glenn Vo, and I am really excited to have this special guest on the podcast. But before I introduce you to the guest, let me ask you a couple of questions. What if there was a way for you to help grow your wealth, maintain your wealth, and you can do it with working with a great professional? And what if this professional says that it's so easy, it's so much easier than rocket science, okay? Well, I have that professional here today. It's Dr. Portia Jackson. Portia, what's up?
Hello, everyone.
Oh man, I'm so excited because literally she is a rocket scientist, and we actually just have to dive right into that. So give us the story behind the rocket scientist, and then what kind of led you to helping entrepreneurs like myself not only grow my wealth, but maintain it and do it in a very easy way. So let's go back a little bit and talk about your background and how you end up working with people like me.
Yep. So, I guess it all started. I've always loved math and science, problem solving. And so growing up, people are like, oh, it's like doctor, lawyer, engineer. That's what I heard growing up. Like that was success, right? So I was like, engineer it is. It was a doctor for a while. And then I saw ER once, if you remember, like Time Warp, going all the way back to the ER days. I was like, I don't do bodily fluids. So engineer it is. So anyway, so I did that. I went all the way through, got my PhD, went to University of Michigan, USC to get my PhD, and was in that field for 5 years. Initially, the plan, I wanted to be an astronaut, but it turns out, ironically, I am 1 inch too short, which I thought would be a benefit because I thought you would want like small people in space, right? Crowded, but apparently not. Anyway, so I was in that industry for 5 years and it wasn't very fulfilling to me. But something I've always been doing is helping people with their finance. It was growing up, I was either reading books about personal development or money and how to make money. And so I was just always doing that. And I was like, you know what if I just do this, full time? And so that's how I got into it, because I was already doing it. And me being me, I want to be the best at what I do. So I went out and got certified. And you're like, well, if you're going to take these classes, you might as well just go ahead, take the exam, become certified. I was like, great, let's do it. But to do that, it involved the experience. So I had to leave the field of being an engineer, working in the aerospace industry, go out and get the experience, became certified a few years later. And a lot of stuff happened in between that, kind of transitioning out of corporate a couple of times. But the end game has always been to help people with their finance, but in a way that's non-traditional, a way that feels good and is, defining success for what it looks like for them. So although my resume looks like a plate of spaghetti that kind of like wiggling all over the place, I feel like everything and every experience I've gone through has really led up to what I'm doing today, because that was always the plan. I just didn't necessarily know it at the beginning.
Well, and that's why I was so excited about having you on, right? Because again, you just have such an amazing story. And I think a lot of our viewers are going to wonder, like, okay, you made such really big pivots in your career. I wanted to spend a little bit of time there because, again, we have other doctors, we have other professionals, other entrepreneurs, solopreneurs on here listening to this right now. And they're probably thinking like, wow, man, if Dr. Jackson can do that, like maybe I can possibly do something there. So talk about like the whole process of going home and just telling your husband or maybe telling your parents, like, hey, you know what? I spent all this time, got a PhD, and now I'm just going to do this here. And then also, when you also got certified and started helping people on a financial part, pivoting again and just saying, you know what? I'm not going to do the corporate. I think I'm going to do it in a different way that can better serve my community and my audience. So there's two things there. Talk about those conversations and just the mindset you had to making those shifts.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said mindset, because that is really probably the biggest part of it, is just the motivation for doing all of this. So, yes, most people will be like, well, you spent all that time in school. Like, why in the world are you changing? But I think I was 29 and I had a serious case of what I call like the Sunday, like gloomies, right? Where it's like, it's Sunday night and I'm like, oh, I have work tomorrow. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm not even 30 yet. I mean, I got my PhD when I was 27, and this is 2 years into my career of something where people usually stay there until they die. Like really, like where I worked was an amazing, but people literally, that's where they went after they retired, because like their wives or whatever didn't want them in the home, because it was a very male dominated field. But I just wanted more for my life. And it just got to the point where I got just so uncomfortable in being uncomfortable that I had to make the change. Like it was just very, very clear. And I had so much gratification and fulfillment and enjoyment teaching others about finance and personal finance just within my church and my sorority. I was always doing small groups on the side. And so when I mentioned it to my husband, he already kind of knew. And one part of my spaghetti plate resume that I didn't mention was between 2013 up until late last year, I was actually in online marketing, because when I left my engineering career, I was like, well, I don't want to leave the income. Like, I have lifestyle needs that I enjoy, that I wasn't really ready to give up. And so we had always planned that some type of online business would fill the gap between being a entry-level financial planner and advisor and what I was making as an engineer. So during that time, I had a podcast, and then I ran a digital marketing agency, and that really what bridged the gap. So he's been very supportive. I think it's because I had the plan, and he kind of just knew me, that I would just be successful at whatever I put my mind to. Now, my parents were a slightly different story, because I mean, at this point, I'm not dependent on them, right? Like, they just want to see me succeed and be happy. But they were very, very confused, because they're like, what are you doing? And does that pay the same? And well, what about, can you do both? Because they're just looking at like, well, we paid for all this education. I was like, grad school was free. I got a scholarship, like hold your roll, like slow the roll, right? I don't think really knew what I was doing, or like saw the vision. Very supportive, but supportive from more of a place of confusion. Whereas my husband was, I think, more supportive from a place of like, yeah, let's make this work, because it like directly impacts his life too. And even today, I'm just like, just look at the website, because I still, they know I help people with money, but they're just like, so what is it exactly? So yeah, that's where it is. But it was necessary. Like, it was like a soul craving is the only way I could really describe it. It wasn't like, oh, this is a good idea, and like, let me go try it. Like, oh, let's try the new, Italian restaurant down the street. It was like a guttural type of like, I have to do something different.
And I think that what makes you, there's a lot of rocket scientists out there, right? There's a lot of financial planners out there, but there's not that many that are both, right? Mm-hmm. And I think you bring a very unique perspective, especially with me being a doctor, and I know other doctors and whatnot. You being a doctor, you understand like what it takes for us to go through this, or any kind of high level entrepreneur. And a lot of times we're in our lane, like we're thinking about our business, we're growing our business, we know how to grow our business. Mm-hmm. But then it's kind of like, well, okay, what do I do with all this money? And I would say the worst people when it comes to managing their money are professionals, because you have a high level of, intelligence and grit and all that stuff. You naturally feel like, well, you know what? Let me read a couple of books. Let me read a couple of books and I'll just figure it out, right? Yeah. And it's so funny, because we see people all day long that come into our offices and they say, well, I Googled something. We're looking at like, come here, But again, we are the worst people when it comes to that. So again, just coming from that arena and knowing how people always try to like teach themselves stuff, like how do you, like, what is your advice to other professionals who are listening to this right now and they're like, well, I'm a smart guy, I can figure it out, but better, you've been on both sides. What is your advice to those professionals?
My biggest piece of advice, and full honesty, I used to be one of those people, like in various parts, whether it was money or some part of my business. I'm like, I can figure out how to do a website, but I'm like, is this the best use of my time? And that's my biggest piece of advice, is to think about the vision and like the legacy that you're building. And is it really worth your time, which is limited, to learn something that you could just hire someone else out to do? Because money is infinite. I know at times it doesn't feel that way, but you can create money at any given point in time. You cannot create more seconds, minutes, days, weeks, years of your life. You can't. Right. And so I know, while it seems like, oh, well, I can figure this out, I'm smart, you absolutely can. I'm pretty sure with enough books and enough time, enough certifications or whatever, you can do that. But is that what you want to do? Like, whatever your business is, whether it's, coaching or being a dentist or or whatever it is, like, stay in your zone of genius, because that's where you shine and where you thrive, and outsource the rest. Like, I didn't build my website. I'm a rocket scientist. Could I have figured it out? Heck yeah. But was that the best use of my time? No, it wasn't. Time and energy. I mean, I'm a mom of 3, married, got a dog. One of my kids has special needs. Like, I have to really look at what are my most important resources, and it's time and energy. And if I can figure out how to conserve those two and pay for that with money, I'm going to do it hands down all day, every day.
You bring up a very interesting point, because again, can you figure out a lot of things? Yeah, sure. Most people, can you learn how to do dentistry? Yeah, you can go back to undergrad, take all the technique, and go to dental school yourself. You can do that. But if you already in that zone of genius, like you're saying, like if you're already making money, you know what you're doing there, like why do you want to take your eye off of that or take your
Right.
time away from that and try to learn something new when you can keep doing it and work with someone who knows what they're doing. Okay, so we're going to go a little off script here because, again, I think it naturally goes into what I want to bring up here. What is, Portia, with all the clients you've worked with, you work with so many different people, professionals, online entrepreneurs who are doing so like really well. What are the biggest mistakes that you see over and over that these entrepreneurs, that your clients are making all the time? You're like, you know what? I have a feeling that's what's going on, and it happens all the time. Can you name like maybe the top few that you see all the time?
Okay, so one of the top mistakes I see people make is not tracking their numbers, and not just financial numbers, but like all the numbers. So they'll say, "Oh, I had a launch, but it failed." And it's like, well, what does failed mean? It's like you spent $2 on Facebook ads, but yet you made 10,000, but you wanted to make 50. You think it failed. That's actually a pretty good success, right? Same thing when it comes to building their wealth. They're like, "Oh, I'm so far behind." I'm like, well, if we actually sit down, a lot of times that one piece of the entire puzzle that we put together provides so much clarity, because it's one of those things. It's like, it's very similar to like if you have a task on your to-do list for the day, right? And it's not something you really want to do. So you keep kicking it down the road, and somehow it grows and grows in your mind, right? Like it's like this blob that's like starts to take over, and you finally sit down and do the task. You're like, you know what? I could have had that done a long time ago, and it didn't take as much time and effort as I thought. A lot of times people are not taking that same approach when it comes to their money and their numbers. It's like you put it off and you kick it down and you think it's such a big deal. But once you sit down and you're working with someone, you're like, oh, I can do this. And the other mistake I have, or a lot that I see a lot of people make, especially entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, very successful professionals, are, oh, well, we make a lot of money, so we don't really need to like worry about it. Like we'll just,
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Right. Like, oh, we have it in a savings account, or it's in our checking account. Like we're good. And I'm like, yes, you're good, but you could be great. So yes, you're sitting on a lot of cash. And newsflash, in March of 2022, when we're recording this, if you have a lot of your money in cash right now, you're losing money because of inflation. And so a lot of people are relying on the revenue, on the income, and not maximizing what they have, not realizing that they have like this slow drip coming out of their bank account called inflation, when they're losing out on so many different opportunities that we have available to us today to build wealth. And so those are the biggest mistakes I see.
Oh man, that inflation word really hurts, especially now, right? I know we hear it all the time. And let me ask you this, Portia, and again, it probably drives you insane that you probably know these people are probably in your circle, right? You probably know them, you probably hear about them, you probably hear all these other stories. But does it drive you insane when someone like really intelligent or really successful, and they're like just asking people online or just a random dude on the street for financial advice? Does that drive you crazy? And again, it's like, why do they do that? Like, why are you asking your neighbor next door, or you're asking, actually not your neighbor, you're asking his son, like, hey, I want to, what kind of cryptocurrency should I be,
right.
What NFT should I be putting in there? And that's like your sole source of financial information. Does that drive you crazy? And how do you feel about that? Why does that happen? Why do these smart people do this?
Yeah, honestly, it doesn't really drive me crazy, because I understand where it's coming from. And a lot of time it's coming from the, I don't know enough. I don't trust myself. I'm like not good enough, which is like deep, like mindset, personal development work, right? Because it's like on the surface, yes, we're all very smart, running successful businesses, having great careers, but it's like, oh, but when it comes to like this one area, I'm not so sure. I'm feeling a little bit insecure here. Everybody else around me has the answer except for myself. And it's like, well, if you actually just kind of take the time to kind of think about what is it that you're going for, and maybe you need a little instruction, sure, that's fine, right? But that's why I'm just like, financial advisors are great, and hedge funds are great, but at the end of the day, there's no secret sauce, right? Like there's nothing out there that is like new under the sun, essentially. So it's like, you really have to kind of learn to like trust yourself. So I have really more like empathy and like compassion when I see people doing that, because I know they're trying to be better. They're just kind of going about it like, I don't want to say the wrong way. I don't like to like put judgments on things, but they're doing the best that they can in that time. But is it a little bit annoying? I mean, yeah, I'm human. Yes, it is. But at the same time, I know what they're trying to do. I just think there's a better approach to do it.
Well, and I think that's why it's just makes so much sense. And I'm so glad to be connected with you and know that someone out there like you is there to help us, because you've been on both sides of the track. That's the thing. Like you understand from the professional side, like what
Yes.
the insecurities are. I'm just gonna go ahead and throw that out there because there's some insecurities there, right? Like
It
we're
is.
used to knowing everything, and we kind of don't know this, and like I don't know if I want to ask for help, and so I want to just do the safe way, and I'll ask like my neighbor's son, right? Let's who is
Yeah.
he, right? He's not gonna say it. He's not gonna judge, and you're
Yeah.
on the other side too because you work with those people, and now you know. So with that being said, like for those who are listening, I mean, how do you normally work with clients? Like, do you,
Yeah.
you just say, hey, let's get on a Zoom call or all that? And again, we'll come back. We'll let you guys know how to reach out to Portia. But I just want to know, like, what the normal, like, how does that work? Like, do you talk to them first? Do you have them fill out a questionnaire? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So when I work with people, I always speak with them first before we agree to, have like this working agreement because I want it to be a good fit for both people. But I have a very intense, I don't want to say intense, I'll say in-depth onboarding experience where it's like, hey, let's get all the numbers out there, right? It's like stepping on the scale January 1st if you had a very indulgent like holiday season, right? It's like, let's just see where we're starting. There's no judgment, but we need to know this to see what the plans are, right? And so then after that, it's very one-on-one and very personal on one side of my business. And then I also have our blueprint model where it's course driven, but it still has that one-on-one interaction because we have like the group Q&A calls every week. And then you're able to submit things for private feedback. So you still have that private experience because not most people don't want their financials in a public space. Yeah. So you still are able to get that private feedback, but you're also still able to leverage like the collective, like group energy of what's going on. Oh, I wanted to ask that question, but I was kind of scared, but I'm glad that person asked it. And so that's what we're really putting most of our focus right now is on the blueprint and kind of, phasing out the one-on-one, but there's a few spots left still.
Well, awesome stuff. And again, we'll talk about later on this podcast about how you can get signed up, how you can reach out further with Portia. But again, look, I mean, depending on how you want to learn, if you're really like on the academic side, hey, Portia's got something on the academic side. If you're more like me, like, hey, I trust you, just do what you got to do. And then just kind of fill me in. That's that there too. Okay. So we're going to shift gears here. We're going to go into like a segment I call the Big Entrepreneur 3. So I'm going to ask you, you're an entrepreneur, right? You're a serial entrepreneur. You've gotten different businesses. So we're going to ask you these series of questions when it comes to entrepreneurship. So the first one is share a productivity tip.
Yes.
For entrepreneurs. Share a tip.
Okay. My favorite tip for productivity, and I've tried a lot and read like a lot of books on productivity, and it just always comes down to being simple. I plan my day the next day before the day begins. And then part of that is I have to really like kind of I have to put the blinders on, like those little things they put on the horses to like really focus. So I bought literally probably all the planners on the market. I am a planner junkie. My daughter is even like, do not go down that aisle when we're in Target. And she's only 8 and she already knows I have like a planner thing. So I literally just take a blank sheet of like printer paper, fold it in half, rip it down the middle and write down my appointments at the top, my business stuff in the middle, and my personal stuff at the bottom. And that's it, because I was getting overwhelmed with other planners because I was looking ahead till tomorrow and the next month and all the notes. And then it's like, oh, I forgot about this note. And like it literally, I don't know if you can see it, but like this, it's like this. It's Friday and that's it. Like super, super simple, because if I get too much more than that, my mind starts racing and then I start hopping around doing a bunch of things versus focusing on one task at a time, one appointment at a time. And that has really, really made a difference for me.
Oh man, that is amazing advice. In fact, advice that I'm going to take myself, because again, if you're a very successful professional entrepreneur, we're used to like juggling, we're used to like putting a lot of stuff on our plate. Like we can do it, right? But a lot of times that's like just the worst way to just be productive and be getting the best use out of your day. So I love that. Yeah. I love the fact that it's very simple. Okay. So the next one
other thing too, that it just helps with that is it gets me off my phone, because I was trying to use a lot of different apps too. Cause there's a lot of productivity apps, but it would be like, how did I get from a productivity app to Facebook or to Instagram or to my email? Where it's like, I can't get sidetracked with a blank sheet of paper. So that's the other reason I kind of have stayed old school and analog or whatever with the plan.
And you know what? There's really no excuse, guys. If you're gonna take Portia's technique, but you got some paper, you got a pen. Don't make up an excuse like, hey, I need a remarkable notepad, or I need an iPad, or I need all this stuff. Look, the paper and a pen, that's all you need. Okay. So the next question is, again, we already talked about the paper being a tool, but so we can't use that. Okay. But what's an actual tool? It could be an app. It could be like those planners that you use. It could be like a special pen, whatever it is. Share like a tool that's helped you as an entrepreneur.
hands down, the best tool I've ever used in my business is a tool called High Level. It's an all-in-one, I don't even know what to call it. It's like a mega tool. A lot of people white label it. I white label it for my agency. I know like Julie Stoyan, who you're very familiar with, uses it as FG funnels, but I just love it. Like it literally helped me create a multiple six-figure digital marketing agency because I can do all of my funnels, emails, text messages, calendar, CRM system, all the automations and stuff all in one place. Like it's so fantastic and has saved me so much money from the financial standpoint of trying to piece together like a ConvertKit and a Acuity calendar and ClickFunnels and like all the things. Like it's all in one, and it's just been a game changer. For me.
And you know what? It's just like you use it and you just think like, where have you been like my whole life? Like,
yeah. And it's like they saw the need in the market and they created a solution for it. And I'm like, this is so good. Like, it's almost one of those things like, how did they not have this before? You know, it's like, if you think back, like way back in the 80s, they used to have like the smoking section of the airplane. And stuff like that didn't make any sense. Like it made no sense that this tool did not exist before a few years ago.
Yeah, I love that. Such a great tool. It's a tool I use all the time as well. So, okay, this is going to be a hard one. This is the one, Portia, I'm just going to warn you right now. This is the one that stumps everybody. Everyone's just like, gives me the deer in the headlight stare. So hopefully you break that trend there.
Sure.
Share your favorite business or self-help book. And you want to pick one, just one.
I have it because it stays on my desk every day because it keeps me focused. You ready? And I'm pretty sure you're not ready for this, but it's this children's book and it's called What Does It Mean to Be an Entrepreneur? And I love it. I actually bought it for my daughters. I love it because one, it has, you know, it's diversity and inclusion. It shows different types of people being entrepreneurs, but it breaks down what it actually means to be an entrepreneur. And I think that gets lost once we get into the, how big is my list? How many people are listening to my podcast? How many people are buying my offers? And it really gets into the core of it is, what are the problems in the world that you think you can solve? And how can you solve it to help the most amount of people? And it talks about taking risk. It talks about rejection. It talks about making a plan and like, you know, perseverance and everything like that. But it's written for children. So it just makes it so simple to remind yourself and like reground of, this is why I'm doing this. And I love all the other books like Think and Grow Rich and like all the other things that are like so, you know, popular and common. But sometimes you just need to break it down and just go back to like second grade and be like, this is why I'm doing this. And I love it.
We'll definitely put a link of where to get that book in the show notes for sure. So I want to definitely get it for my daughter as well. And hey, I want to flip through it too. Again, it's an easy read, right? So I love that. I love it. And I will say this, just for, you are like my first guest to ever bring up a children's book. Just want to let you know that. So you're the first, and that's an awesome book too. Okay, so we're going to shift gears again, and we're going to go back in time, right? We're going to go way back, right? Way back, okay?
Yeah.
So again, a lot of times we learn from the past mistakes, past situations, and you know, it's not all about like all the successes and stuff. Sometimes we got to learn from mistakes, okay? So learning from the past is our next segment, and I'm going to ask you to share a big mistake that you made in the past that you learned something very significant from. Look, if you're like me, you've made a ton of mistakes. And
I know, it's like, which one?
Some mistakes I didn't really learn anything. Like I just learned like, okay, just stay away from that type of person. That's it. Yeah. But I'm talking about a mistake that you made that you actually learned something like really significant that's helped you out.
Yes. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've made in business was very early on. I was 22 and I had, being very goal oriented, I was like, I am going to buy my first rental property before I move out to LA. Because this was in between graduating from Michigan. I was going to move out to LA to go to grad school at USC. And even though it made no logical sense, because I was living in Chicago, that's where I grew up. So I was with my parents in between the time. And it made no sense to buy a rental property, your first one, and then leave. But it was on my list. Like I had to complete the list, right? And being the type of person who might accidentally do something that wasn't on the list, and I'll go back and write it just so I can cross it off the list. You can kind of see where this is going. Yeah. So found the house. I had no idea what I was doing. I just saw it. It was a flyer in my gym. I was went to look at it. I was like, yeah, it looks good to me. I never got an appraisal. I'm buying the house. And so I bought my first rental property when I was 22 in the beginning of August. I moved out to Los Angeles at the end of August. And the first few months, I'm like, oh, this is so amazing. I'm going to be a millionaire, like easy peasy. Until your tenants like forget to turn or leave the heat on in the winter in Chicago, and then all your pipes burst.
Oh God.
And then everything takes a nosedive because I didn't think about you should have savings. So anyway, so the biggest mistake to summarize is sticking to the plan when you're the best thing and your intuition is telling you to pivot and kind of being locked into, but this is what I want to do. This is what I said I was going to do versus like, you know what, this is now the plan has shifted. Yeah. And honestly, that wasn't the first time I made that mistake, or it was the first time I made that mistake, but it wasn't the last time. It was a lesson that I had to kind of keep learning. You know, sometimes it's like, you know, you didn't get it this time, you know, I'm going to give it to you again. And then
that's me. I like to learn things the hard way multiple times.
Yeah. Now I'm all like, hey, can I learn this? Like, what's the lesson in this like hard time, this mistake? So I don't have to repeat this. Like, that's the wisdom I'm getting from this. But that's been the biggest thing for me, being very type A, Enneagram 1, very, you know, former engineer. I like my plans. I like the strategy and I'm sticking to it. And that's good for certain things, like trying to, you know, finishing a PhD. Not so hot when it cost you tens of thousands of dollars over the course of your 20s, like some of, you know, when you're trying to adult in the world and you have like this ball and chain on you. But you know what? I have to look back and say, at the time I made the best decision I knew how to make. And that's when I look at all my mistakes. That's what I have to go back and say. Like, nobody's just like, oh, let me just make this huge mistake and kind of mess up my finances for a few years, or yeah, let me do that. Like, nobody says that. Like, we're all doing the best that we can do in any given time. So I try not to judge 22-year-old Portia from, you know, almost 40-ish Portia perspective, because that's totally unfair.
Well, you know, we're going to kind of stay on that same kind of like path with the 20-year-old Portia, or maybe we'll even go further back. But if you could go back in time and talk to the younger version of yourself, you know, you can pick at the 20-year-old version of you, the teenage version, whatever you want, right? If you can go back there and just like, you only had like a minute to just like give some advice, like, hey, look, I'm your future self. I'm going to lay it out here and I'm just going to go back to my own time. What would you say to her?
Trust your gut, your intuition, like that nudging that you feel of like, this doesn't feel right, or I really want to do this, even though everybody else says this is the right way. Like, follow your gut, trust your intuition. Even if you can't explain why, it usually is leading you. Actually, I believe it's always leading you the right way. And don't worry about like pleasing others. You're just here really to please yourself and to please God.
You know, I will tell you this. One of the best advice I ever got from my mom was go against your gut at your own peril. That's what she always told me. She's like, if you know it's not right and you just do it, that's on you. Like, that's on you. Okay. Like the universe is giving you like a sign here, and you're just saying, hey, forget you. I'm going to do what I want. Yeah. You're going to do it at your own peril. So again, that's one of the things that, again, you know, moms
are so awesome.
Mom's always got the best advice. Right? and they also love it when you have to admit it years later that they told you, like when you have kids, right? Like they love it. They love that stuff. You know, that's the best way to make mom's day. All right. So, okay. So we're at it. Let's just imagine we're at the Marketer's Heart event. We were there not too long ago, right?
Yes.
We're hanging out there. Someone comes up to you, Portia, and says, I love what you do. And can you just tell me how I can do what you do, right? And we're about to get on the bus to go to Epcot, right? You only have like 1 minute to tell them, like give them some kind of advice. They're like, I want to do what you do. How do I do it? How do you explain it to them in like 1 minute?
Yeah. So if they want to be a financial and lifestyle coach, I would just say, one, understand the world of finance so you can be good at what you do. Understand personal development so you can weave the two together, because it's rarely about the numbers on the page and more about what's going on underneath and what people actually really want. And then just really have a vision for where you want to take not just your business, but what legacy do you want to leave? What impact do you want to have on the world? Because yeah, we could talk about a P&L statement or a budget all day long, but at the end of the day, people want to live a life that feels fulfilling to them, that's successful to them, and to focus on that.
I love that. Guys, folks, that is the difference between working with Portia and some person who's working at a big box corporate financial planning company that will just give you something that is kind of like cookie cutter and just shove it down your throat, right? I mean,
and you only see them like once or twice a year, if that.
And that's the thing. So like that answer right there is the reason why you should be working with her. And with that being said, what's the best way? Okay. What's the best way to get a hold of you? Again, guys, you know, you can always, I'm going to tag her. I'm going to tag her in this post, and I'll have some links. You can go to a website, you know, you can send her a message on Facebook and stuff like that. But if someone wanted the more traditional way, right? Not the untraditional way that I like to reach out to people, but the traditional way, what's the best way to get a hold of you, but also learn more about what you do?
Yeah, so the hub for everything is our website, which is wealthyandfulfilled.com. And that's where you can learn more about me and my background and how this whole spaghetti plate of stuff has come together into this beautiful creation that I'm so proud of, as well as our current offerings. I have a freebie there as far as finding out your wealth superpower, getting in contact. All the information is there. So that's wealthyandfulfilled.com.
Portia, thank you so much for jumping on.
Thank you, Glenn.
I had such a great time here and learned so much. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and just check out the show notes so you can get a hold of Portia, and we'll see you guys next time.
See ya.